Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today's a really important show. And actually today is kind of like the climax of a series of shows we've done, over the past decade about an herbicide called glyphosate. And a lot of people probably don't know what glyphosate is. So I want to play a little clip here, just a 40-second clip. So let's just play this real quick.
Glyphosate-based herbicides are used to control a wide variety of weeds that grow among food crops, residential lawns, gardens, public parks, roadsides, conservation lands, wildlife areas, rangelands, forests, waterways, and more. These herbicides come under a long list of names, including Roundup, Roundup Ultra, Roundup Pro, Aquamaster, Aquaneat, Palado, Accord, Rodeo, Touchdown, Backdraft, Expedite, EasyJect, Glyphos, Laredo, Buccaneer Plus, and Wrangler, among others. These products contain a variety of chemicals, but in all of them, glyphosate is the primary ingredient.
Okay, so there's your crash course on what is glyphosate. It's Roundup. Many of you probably use it on the weeds in your driveway that grow through the cracks in the concrete. It's those nuisance weeds. By the way, you can use vinegar and it'll kill them too. It's a contact herbicide. But glyphosate is also notoriously used in the production of food, most notably wheat. I did a show years ago where we actually got pages of the manual from Monsanto to farmers, teaching them how to synchronize their wheat crops by spraying glyphosate on it just days before they harvest it. And then it becomes flour and it's in your bread and it's in your cereals and everything else when it has the most glyphosate residually on it. So what is it about glyphosate that some people think we should be worried? My guest today is Dr. Stephanie Seneff. She's an MIT scientist who was the first person I ever heard talk about Roundup and glyphosate years ago, over a decade ago. And she was attacked by Monsanto. They attempted to discredit her science. They tried to discredit everything she did. They tried to crush her. They wanted her silenced. But guess what? Pretty much everything that she predicted that glyphosate was doing to us, our health, and the planet has now come true. Isn't it funny how we see this all the time in the mainstream? Nothing to worry about, nothing to watch here, go by. And people are saying, hey, wait a minute. I mean, kind of like today, we see this today. No, don't worry, everything is safe. But there are some people who are going, people who have no vested interest. Dr. Seneff makes no money whether glyphosate is sold or not. Okay? Monsanto makes money if glyphosate is sold. So I would take their science with a grain of salt. But here we are today where we could have acted years ago. And who knows what the benefits would have been. But we didn't, because instead the people making money poisoning us didn't want you to know about this. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. We have to first thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Buy yourself some tasty pastries. They are amazing, less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality dairy protein. They taste amazing. Your kids will love them, even though they're good for them. And if you don't want to buy a box, but you'd like to try a box, listen during the commercial break for the secret word. When you hear the secret word, simply email it to onair@superhumanradio.net, include your mailing address, and we will send you a box courtesy of the generosity of Ron Penna. So take advantage of that while they last. And now I'll bring my guest aboard, somebody I'm really proud to say has been on my podcast numerous times, Dr. Stephanie Seneff. How you doing, Dr. Seneff?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
So it was years ago that you've been on my show numerous times, and predominantly it's always been about glyphosate. You and Dr. Anthony Samsel came on, and thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, you guys got a hold of emails between Monsanto and other parties where you said, look, they knew there was something wrong with it, but they put it on us anyway. So for those people who haven't been here for the entire journey, what triggered your interest in glyphosate all those years back?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, actually, because I started with autism. I was really getting worried about autism around 2007 timeframe. And rates were going up, and they were saying, well, we're just diagnosing it more. It's all genetic, and I didn't believe that. I thought something in the environment was causing the autism, and I wanted to figure out what it was. And I actually spent a long time learning a lot about autism and looking at various possible, factors that could be causing it, and pretty much striking out, just thinking maybe there's something about the gut, because clearly they have a lot of gut problems, maybe too many antibiotics for ear infections. I was fussing around with those kinds of ideas. And it was just serendipitous that I happened to be at a conference where Professor Don Huber was speaking about glyphosate. And it was a 2-hour presentation. I didn't know what glyphosate was when I walked into the room. I'm embarrassed to admit at this point because it's so much a part of my vocabulary now. And he presented glyphosate. It's the most common herbicide on the planet. The United States uses more per person than any other country in the world. We're very sick. We have a huge medical expenses that we can't get a hold of. It's bankrupting our country practically with the medical costs. And when he explained how glyphosate works, it fit so well with what I understood autism to be that I felt like this is my answer. I really was very confident. I went back, I got in touch with Anthony Samsel, and we collaborated on a number of papers after that. And he could do the actual lab work, whereas I just do the thinking, so I'm sort of theoretical. I don't have a lab, but we worked together really well, and he would come up with results, and we would write papers, and the more I looked, the more concerned I got, and then eventually it took us a while to figure out the real mechanism by which glyphosate causes all the harm. It's not just autism. I came to realize there's so many other diseases. Once you look around, you think, oh, everybody's fat now. We used to be skinny. I mean, back when I was a kid, you never came across people that were so big that are now almost, you don't even notice them because everybody's that big. Everybody's fat. Oh yeah, of course you get fat when you get old. Of course you do. I mean, we don't even think that it's a problem anymore.
That was not the problem back in the 1920s when malnutrition was the problem and there were no fat people. And that's why guys like Fatty Arbuckle became megastars just because of their rotundness. They became popular movie stars.
Yes.
Let me ask you a couple questions I'm sure that people want to hear about. Is the pathway that glyphosate may be associated with the onset of autism the same as, say, its role in Parkinson's disease? Because now we know that it's related to Parkinson's. Are the pathways exactly the same, or is glyphosate this multi-pathway problem we have?
It is a multi-pathway problem, and that's the key thing. And it's because of its mechanism of toxicity, which is totally unique to glyphosate. I don't know any other chemical in the world that has this mechanism of toxicity, which is extremely interesting and extremely dangerous. And it has to do with building proteins. The proteins are made out of amino acids. Proteins are the workhorses of the body. They're the enzymes, the transporters, the receptors. They're all proteins. And they're made according to the famous DNA code, the 4-letter code, Watson and Crick, that kind of thing. And when the protein is assembled, you're looking at the code and you're putting the amino acid in, and you're building beads on a chain, or like paper dolls holding hands. Each paper doll is an amino acid. And glycine is one of the basic 20 coding amino acids, glycine. Very, very important. It's not just in proteins. Glycine is also a neurotransmitter. And it's also a precursor to some very important molecules. So when you mess up glycine, you mess up a lot of stuff. And glyphosate is a complete glycine molecule, except that it has extra material stuck onto its nitrogen atom. And so because it's shaped just like glycine at its base, it fits into the model for the DNA code. And the system can make a mistake and throw glyphosate in there instead of glycine. And when you do that, you really mess up the protein, because many proteins have essential glycines. There has to be glycine at that spot in order for that protein to work. And if you replace glycine with something else, you can totally kill the protein's ability to do its job, or make it misfold into these amyloid, misfolded proteins that cause things like Alzheimer's and all these neurodegenerative diseases are related to misfolded proteins, and they can get misfolded because glyphosate is substituted for glycine in those proteins.
So excuse me. Dr. Anthony Samsel came on my show probably around 2012, 2013, and we talked about how glyphosate is incorporated into tissue,
yes,
instead of glycine. However, the body turns tissue over. It breaks down everything into its component amino acids, reuses some, disposes of others, but it can't do that with glyphosate. Even though glyphosate is a synthetic form of glycine, the body is not equipped to manage it, dispose of it, break it down, reuse it, or any of the things that it does with real glycine. So Dr. Samsel came on and talked about amyloidosis.
Yes.
Right after his interview, I found a study that there is a new form of heart failure. And it's due to amyloidosis of heart muscle tissue that causes the tissue to become fibrotic. It doesn't function. And so after that interview, I thought to myself, oh my God, I wonder if this is a result of glyphosate accumulating in heart tissue. But forget about that. We know that amyloid buildup is associated with Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is on the rise. We have younger and younger people in their 30s and 40s developing Alzheimer's disease. There's a correlation between amyloidosis and glyphosate. Why isn't anyone at the FDA, at the USDA, at the government, why is anyone going, wait a minute, maybe we're moving too fast with this product? It's everywhere now.
No, I totally agree. And I don't understand how they don't notice it, because we have, Nancy Swanson also collaborated with me for many years. And she was the one who first started putting together these charts that show perfect correlation between the rise in glyphosate usage. Glyphosate usage went way up in the first decade of this century, 2000 to 2010. And then these diseases went up right in step with glyphosate: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, ADHD, various gut problems, inflammatory gut, celiac disease, all these diseases, and even some cancers, pancreatic cancer and thyroid cancer. Of course, the one that's the lawsuits, the blood cancers like a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Right.
All these diseases going up dramatically, and nobody cares. We just have to spend more money on healthcare. And glyphosate's going up exactly in step. And people say, oh, well, correlation doesn't mean causation. I mean, they always find a way to weasel their way out of it, which makes me very angry, because they won't face up to it. Of course, obesity is another one. Diabetes and obesity, both going up exactly in step with the rise in glyphosate usage. Huge list. And then they'll say, well, one chemical, couldn't possibly cause so many diseases, right? These are the arguments they use to get out of it. It's a level of disbelief to think that this chemical that I've been using on my dandelions, people just go to the garden store, buy some Roundup, kill the weeds in their walkway, and they think it's perfectly safe. So
the kids are playing in the driveway. But never mind that. Like when I see my neighbors spraying, I go and ask them, hey, what are you spraying? And if they say Roundup, I'm like, no, don't spray that, because I don't want that coming in my direction to my house. And so we can't even get away from it at this point in time. So let's connect another dot here. About 7 years ago, when I became interested in glyphosate, thanks to you, I was reading a paper that indicated that glyphosate was being incorporated with amoxicillin to be used as a human antibiotic.
Oh my!
And I thought, wait a minute, why would they use glyphosate? Well, glyphosate is a powerful antimicrobial.
Yes.
The difference between an antimicrobial and an antibiotic is dose and duration of treatment. So now I'm thinking, wait a minute. So glyphosate is a weak antibiotic. It is. Now we know, I've done shows, missing microbes. I've done shows that show the linkage between antibiotic use and obesity. In fact, that's why they gave cows antibiotics just to fatten them up more than anything else. But and now I'm starting to think, well, wait a minute, maybe the glyphosate day in and day out, multiple, you eat so many things you eat have glyphosate. So it's not like the one a non-organic tomato you ate. It's the food that came processed. It's your bread. And so I'm thinking maybe obesity is linked to glyphosate exposure because we're getting so much of it. What do you think?
I absolutely think so. And in fact, in my book, I explain the mechanism by which glyphosate would cause obesity. There's also liver disease, fatty liver disease, which of course is connected to obesity, epidemic in fatty liver disease. There was a study on humans, and the people who had fatty liver disease had higher levels of glyphosate in their urine, statistically significant, compared to people who didn't. And the ones who had worse progression, higher progression disease, worse cases, had more glyphosate in the urine than ones who had lesser cases. It was 3 different groups that all statistically significant different amounts of glyphosate in their urine. And the study on rats showed that glyphosate exposure at levels below regulatory limits to rats caused fatty liver disease. So I have a whole chapter on the liver, and I explain the mechanism, and the mechanism has to do with glyphosate substituting for glycine in critical proteins.
Let me put the book up here real quick so that people can. I'll do this a couple times today. The book is called Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Planet and the Environment. shrnetwork.biz/toxic, TOXIC, lowercase, and you'll be taken right to the book. It's a must-read book because it affects every single person on this planet, no matter what country you hail from. Other countries have become smarter than the U.S. U.S. is in bed. Politicians and Monsanto in bed. There's several people that Mike Pompeo, I think, was some high-level executive at Monsanto for a while. I mean, we have all this incestuous politicians and industry going on. So clearly, we're the biggest consumers because we have the most abusive parents.
That's a good way to look at it. It just really frustrates me. And I'll tell you, Mexico is really taking a leadership role. They've decided they're going to get rid of glyphosate completely by 2024. And the United States is, of course, also upset with them for that. And they're pressuring them hard. They're trying to play bully to keep them from doing it. I mean, it's just so frustrating to watch my government be the messenger, the leader in the world of promoting glyphosate throughout the world and causing all this trouble everywhere. It makes me extremely angry that my government doesn't. It's so obvious to me what's going on, and they refuse to see it just because they're making, they're getting paid off. Basically, they must be getting paid off very well to be so stubborn. They should care about autism. I mean, the autism rates in this country are just going through the roof, and now the earliest ones are aging out of the system, so that nobody knows what to do with these adult autistic people anymore. It's just such a tragedy. Parents, the parents of the autistic adults are going to start dying, and then there won't be any place to put them. I mean, it's just really, really sad. And it doesn't seem to be a problem. The government never talks about autism. Autism's just fine. They don't care. It's amazing. Schools are all burdened by the cost of bringing up these autistic kids. And of course, the parents, the family is completely discombobulated by having this very dependent child that requires constant care.
I have a cousin who has a son who is in his late 20s now. And, we've talked about it. And he said, we have to think about once we die, we have to put things in place to take care of him.
Exactly.
And this is a travesty. And unfortunately, once again, genetics is blamed, and it's genetic. We know cancer doesn't have, it's not genetic. It's lifestyle, it's diet, it's not observing sleep. But the thing, autism, it's not genetic. There's no genetic predisposition to develop autism.
There probably is. Some kids are more susceptible than others just because they have proteins that are already not working quite well, and then glyphosate comes in and makes them worse. So they have
what I was going to say was there are some kids out there whose body, maybe it's the immune system, isn't up for the task of fighting all these fights. and
Yes.
they succumb to it, and there's other kids who don't. But I don't even know that that's genetic per se, but maybe there is a genetic predisposition. I don't want to step out of my bounds here. But the real issue here is right now, someone listening or watching this show has a neighbor that's slathering their backyard in glyphosate to get rid of the weeds that they have. How long does that exposure last? How long does glyphosate actually last once it's in the soil?
Well, that's a good question. And the answer is complicated, actually, because it depends on the soil type, and it depends on what kinds of microbes are living in the soil. It depends on how much sunlight it's being exposed to. So there's a lot of different ways in which, if there's a lot of organic matter, it can get stuck in there and get hidden so that it doesn't get broken down. So there are ways that it can stick around. So in the ideal conditions, which, Monsanto's, it goes away in 2 weeks, it gets broken down. Ideal conditions, but there are other conditions in which it lasts a long time. And in fact, a study in Canada just recently published looked at trees that had been exposed to glyphosate 12 years ago, and the trees still had significant amounts of glyphosate in the tree itself. So that it goes into the tissues, and then it becomes very, very difficult to get it out. And Monsanto showed this in experiments they did on several different species of animals, but it was a bluegill sunfish experiment that Anthony got through the Freedom of Information Act. He got it from Monsanto. A very interesting study where they exposed these bluegill sunfish. These are fish to radio labeled glyphosate, so they could track the radio label. And then they looked in the tissues. Their whole question was, does it accumulate in the tissues? A very important question to answer. And they were hoping it would all just go out through the urine, go out through the feces, and it would be gone. It would wash away, basically. But they found it in all the tissues of the bluegill sunfish. And then they could measure the radio label to see how much was in there. And then they could use another test to measure the glyphosate. And they found that only 20% of the glyphosate, the rest, 80% of the radio label went missing. They didn't know what it was. So then they said, let's break down the proteins into individual amino acids using an enzyme that can do that. And when they did that, they got up to 70% yield. In other words, another 50% was pulled out of a protein by getting broken down into individual amino acids. Glyphosate got freed up. You can't see it unless it's freed up. So it's hiding in the protein. You might not even know. That's an issue with breast milk. Zen Honeycutt tested glyphosate in breast milk and found it. And then quickly after that, a paper was published, no glyphosate in milk. It was cow's milk they were looking at. Oh, no, don't worry, it's not there. Well, they had precipitated out the proteins before they measured. So they took away the glyphosate, and then they measured, it came up empty. It's in the protein. It's in the protein.
Well, and I remember the study out of Germany, and the study out of Germany showed the presence of glyphosate in breast milk, not in rural communities, but in the city. Which
Wow.
like we figured, if it's in the rural community, sure, they're being exposed to the overspray. And no, these were the people. I want to say it was Munster, Germany.
Yeah.
And the study showed the presence of glyphosate in human breast milk in mothers who lived in the city who never went to the country.
Yeah, and they're eating it. They're basically getting it in their food. They're probably eating more of the processed food because the foods are, Canada just increased the levels allowed in various food products. The country periodically, each country, or at least the United States, has been doing this too for years. Just sometimes increase the level by a factor of 10 that they allow because they find it there. They say, whoops, it's going to be not legal. We better change the level at which it's allowed. That's not because they think it's still safe at that level. It's just because they don't want the product to be sold and to be illegal. Just trying to protect the industry by raising the allowable level in the food. And people don't realize which foods contain it. They think if I buy non-GMO, I'm safe. That's not true at all. In fact, the highest levels are being found in non-GMO foods. The wheat crop, which is sprayed right before harvest, the glyphosate gets into the wheat and people get celiac disease. I think it's a direct hit. I really think glyphosate's the cause of the epidemic we're seeing in celiac disease. In the United States, we've got huge shelves devoted to gluten-free products these days. That wasn't a problem when I was a child. Nobody had gluten intolerance. Nobody.
Right. So explain the different things that glyphosate does. Number one, it can be incorporated into tissue,
yes.
which is a horrible, horrible thing. But then what about its effect on it was thought that we didn't have a shikimate.
Right. That was the argument.
Yeah, but then it turns out the microbes in our gut respond to the shikimate pathway, right?
This is crucial. Yeah, the shikimate pathway is a biological pathway. It consists of a number of enzymes, and they go through process and they produce products. And this pathway is very, very important in plants. All the plants have it. It's essential. They can't live without it. It's an essential part of their metabolism. many of the microbes in our gut also have the shikimate pathway, and they use it to produce products that are essential for us because we can't make those things. We can't make them because we don't have that pathway. We depend upon our gut microbes to supply us with those nutrients. And what they are is the aromatic amino acids. These are 3 of those coding amino acids, like glycine. They are amino acids that go into proteins, and it's tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine. But those amino acids, not only are they essential for protein building, but they're also precursors to a whole bunch of really critical molecules that we use in our bodies use them in really complex ways. Hormones, thyroid hormone, serotonin, melatonin, the skin tanning agent, melanin, several B vitamins. So all of these very essential nutrients, metabolically active molecules come out of that shikimate pathway, and we depend upon our gut microbes to get it started. So when the gut microbes get hit by glyphosate, they can't make enough of these critical molecules, and we become deficient. So serotonin deficiency alone is linked to depression, violent behavior, obesity. All those things are connected to serotonin deficiency. And so, to ignore the fact that our gut microbes depend upon that pathway for something that's essential for their host is just stupidity. And Monsanto just disregarded that, said, oh, this is so great because our cells don't have this pathway, don't have that enzyme, we're safe. And it's just not true because of our gut microbes.
I know Parkinson's disease and diseases of the brain are from the misfolded proteins. Explain how glyphosate being used instead of glycine seems to promote misfolded proteins, correct?
Very, very interesting. Yes, there's a whole class of proteins called prion-like proteins, and the prion protein itself is the classic example of prion-like proteins. And they are associated with various neurodegenerative diseases and other diseases as well. But, there's a specific prion-like protein linked with each one of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and ALS, and then which is Lou Gehrig's disease. And then this one, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, CKD, which is a very serious degenerative disease. That's directly linked.
Isn't that the human version of mad cow disease?
It is, exactly. Yes, it's the classic prion protein that misfolds in association with CKD. And all of those diseases are horrible. You don't want any of those diseases. And all of them are linked to these prion-like proteins misfolding. And there's a characteristic unit called a glycine zipper that is a characteristic feature of all these proteins, glycine zipper. And so that contains 2 glycines with 3 wildcards separating them. It's a pattern in the protein. And a prion protein can have lots of them in that protein. And those glycine zippers are essential for making the protein fold into an alpha helix and going into the membrane. It's how it makes the protein. The glycines are essential for the protein to fold the correct way. When you start putting in negative charge and bulky molecules attached to those glycines, when you substitute glyphosate for the glycine, you end up with a negative charge. You end up with this bulky thing sticking off the nitrogen atom. It won't fold anymore. The glycine is small, and the whole point is that they're small. They can really sew together in that zipper, and the zipper unzips basically, and then the molecule becomes it dissolves in the cytoplasm. Eventually, you accumulate these plaques. Amyloid beta plaque is a classic example in Alzheimer's, and there's Lewy bodies. There's all these different misfolded accumulated proteins. When it has glyphosate in it, I suspect it's much harder to break it down. Normally, if it could misfold, you can sort of mark it for deletion. You can have the protein, you can take it apart, right? Take it apart, make something else. That would be the normal process to clear it. But by having glyphosate stuck in that protein, it makes it very hard to break it down. And then you end up with these accumulations of all these misfolded proteins. And there are other amyloidoses that are also connected to, in other parts of the body, not just the brain. Misfolded proteins causing disease. I suspect
there's amyloidosis of the kidneys now causing kidney failure. We're seeing more amyloidosis occurring in organ tissue than we've ever seen before. And here we are, and I know, it's just correlation. It's not causation. Well, do the friggin' studies to prove that. Nobody wants to do that. Well, no, we don't have to do that. Let's just ignore that. We have a population of people at risk here, but we don't care because we're the government. They're supposed to be protecting us. They don't protect us. They profit from us. Let me ask you a question. Do you think mad cow disease was, in fact, a result of cows being exposed to high levels of glyphosate in their feed? It just went away, right? Remember mad cow disease? They were killing cows. Now, all of a sudden, it's just gone. What happened?
Yeah, well, there was a theory that had to do with manganese. There was Mike Purdy. He was a farmer, an organic farmer. And his cows weren't getting sick, the other cows were, but not his. And they were requiring that they put this. It was I guess it's an insecticide. They Put it on the back of the cow.
Right? Yeah, fly wipe or something like that. Right?
Yes, to control bugs of some sort. I don't know exactly, but they put it on the back of the cow, and it goes on the spinal cord. It goes in the spinal cord. It travels. The manganese travels up to the brain, and then that manganese causes the misfolding of the proteins. Because minerals, metals can. Alzheimer's is associated with aluminum toxicity
and iron. Dr.
and
Dilbert,
iron. Yes.
we're talking about iron accumulation in the brain also. So metals.
Exactly. And then manganese is really what he felt was the link to mad cow. Manganese messing up the prion protein, the way it would fold. One thing interesting, and Anthony and I have a whole paper on manganese, because glyphosate messes up manganese big time. It messes up the body's ability to distribute manganese. And the manganese ends up, normally the manganese binds to the bile acids and gets shipped back it goes to the liver. It binds to the bile acids, gets shipped back to the gut. It goes through the lymph system, attached to fatty acids, and then gets delivered throughout the blood system to the body. But that whole pathway gets shut down by glyphosate, because glyphosate disrupts the ability of the liver to make bile acids. So the manganese ends up piling up in the liver. And then the liver ships the manganese up to the brain along the brainstem, along the vagus nerve, and delivers the manganese to the brainstem nuclei. And the manganese is associated with Parkinson's disease. And so, there's a disease called manganism, which is these welders. They breathe in the manganese, It goes into the nose, it travels along the olfactory nerve, gets into the brainstem, and causes this Parkinson's-like disease. So I think Parkinson's disease is connected to glyphosate in part by the messing up of manganese. It doesn't get distributed throughout the body. It piles up in the liver. It goes along the vagus nerve to the brain, and then it becomes toxic to the substantia nigra, which is the brain nucleus that is associated with Parkinson's disease. Right. So metals are involved, and glyphosate messes up metals. It binds very tightly also to metals and traps them in the gut and prevents access to the metals by the gut microbes. So that's another mechanism of toxicity, both the disruption of the shikimate pathway and chelating and binding very tightly to the metals. Manganese in particular gets tied up in the gut, and the lactobacillus depend upon the manganese to be healthy. They can't get at it because it's bound to the glyphosate. Once the glyphosate gets into an acidic environment, it drops it off. So it does the same thing with aluminum, I believe. It gathers aluminum in the gut, carries it to the brainstem nuclei, and then drops it off, and then the aluminum becomes toxic. So I think that's another pathway by which glyphosate can cause neurological diseases because of those metals, that it's messing up the body's natural ability to circulate the metals correctly.
I want to take our first commercial break, and when we come back, I want to talk about FOIA, and I want to talk about some of the things, shocking things, things that people would be shocked to know that Monsanto knew about glyphosate all the time, that they were saying there's nothing wrong with it, it's completely safe. Dr. Seneff is a kook. I want to talk about what you guys learned from FOIA, because I think that's very, very exciting. We're talking today with Dr. Stephanie Seneff. She's a returning guest on the show, somebody I'm very proud to have on the show from time to time. Her book is Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment. You can go to shrnetwork.biz/toxic to get it. It's a must read, because I'm telling you something. I'm willing to bet a year's paycheck that there's no one listening or watching this show that hasn't been exposed to glyphosate at one time or another, or maybe right now. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar, powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon1 and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today. I need to share with you all a revolutionary new wearable technology called HapBee. HapBee allows you to enjoy the effects of caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, melatonin, and muscle relaxants without actually ingesting anything. Yes, really. They figured out the unique magnetic signature of each of these molecules and recorded them. Just put the HapBee on, choose the signal you want, and it starts projecting the magnetic signature of that molecule that you choose, like coffee for feeling alert. Go to hapbee.com/SHR. That's HAPBEE.com/SHR to learn more more and unlock an $80 discount exclusively for the Superhuman Radio listeners.
Glyphosate-based herbicides are used to control a wide variety of weeds that grow among food crops.
Is there something
residential
interfering with
lawns,
your happiness or ability to achieve your goals? BetterHelp can help. They will assess your needs and match you with a licensed therapist. This is not a self-help or crisis line. It's professional counseling done securely online. They have a broad range of experts and are available worldwide without having to wait in an uncomfortable waiting room. Get the help you need and start living a happier life today. Go to shrnetwork.biz/betterhelp. That's better, HELP, and receive 10% off your first month of counseling when you use the code SHR. Hey, this is Carl Lenore. Superhuman Radio is the longest running health, fitness, and anti-aging podcast in the world, going into our 16th year of continuous production. If you have a product that you think would appeal to the Superhuman Nation, we can get you on the air quickly and inexpensively to help promote your brand. Join the ranks of some of the largest and most successful companies in the world who know how great it is to be affiliated with Superhuman Radio. Contact Dan Kapitsky today. That's DAN.KOPITZKE at superhumanradio.net to learn more. Glyphosate. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. Knoll Creek Hemp Company's Delta 8 soft chews are the premier Delta 8 product on the market today. Knoll Creek's Delta 8 is produced from high-quality hemp-derived CBD oil, and soft chews are manufactured using proprietary nano-emulsification technique that ensures the Delta 8 soft chew will timely deliver the desired effects cleanly and consistently from piece to piece. In a space where at least 70% of the products fail to meet label claims and where most users of conventional hemp products are left disappointed, Knoll Creek's Delta 8 soft chews are a product you can trust. Visit shrnetwork.biz/Delta8. That's DELTA and the number 8 and use the code SHR20 to get 20% off your first order today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Welcome back. So the Freedom of Information Act is a fascinating thing to me because you would think that government would not want anyone knowing what they're up to. But if you know how to ask the right questions, word them properly, because you have to be very specific, I've learned. It's like a game. FOIA says, no, we didn't find anything. You change a word, and then all of a sudden they found 50 emails. And so talk about when you and Dr. Samsel pursued FOIA and what you learned. What are some of the shocking things that you learned that Monsanto knew when glyphosate was already on the market?
I have to say that's completely Anthony's work. So he did that all by himself, even independent of me. So he was the one who hassled, and it took a lot of effort to work with his own state government and then get them to finally get the United States government to agree. And what happened was they said he was demanding the materials, all the research that was done prior to the approval of glyphosate. And he wanted to get all of that data. And of course, Monsanto initially refused. But then the government basically was persuaded to say to Monsanto, if you don't respond in 3 months, I'm going to hand all this stuff over to him. So they waited for Monsanto to get back to them, and Monsanto did not. So I don't know if it was an oversight on their part or what, but they waited the 3 months, and then Anthony got the huge pile. And it's actually very difficult data because you can't search it. It's not searchable. So you have to read everything in order to find it, which is quite tedious. And there's tons and tons of stuff. But he went through it. He's probably still going through it. And he found all kinds of gems in there, including studies that showed cancer, that the results were clearly favoring, that cancer was more probable with higher doses. A dose-dependent increase in cancer in the animals that were studied, and then the other thing they had done was to switch. They had, one of the places they hired had all kinds of issues with their rats not being. They were cheating basically. They would take in data from earlier studies and swap in those as their controls rather than the real controls, where the earlier studies they had been exposed to other things like DDT perhaps, so they were kind of doing a mix and match on the controls. It was a very, very sloppy research. The other thing that I am aware of is that they really kind of manipulated the rules for studying. And this came out with Professor Seralini in France. He did a study in 2012, which was right when I was starting to take a look. Seralini produced this paper where they exposed rats to low doses of glyphosate for their entire lifespan. And this was he modeled it after the studies that Monsanto had been doing, except that Monsanto quit after 3 months. And after 3 months, everything looks good. But by 4 months, they start to diverge. And by the end of their life, they've got all kinds of problems, kidney troubles, liver failure, massive tumors in the female rats, early death, reproductive issues. All these things showed up, but they took time. So I think, and then the Monsanto had said, the rule is if you don't see anything after 3 months, you're good to go. So I suspect they might have figured out, if you wait too long, you start to see stuff. So
they must have did a 4-month study and said, hey, if we stop at 3, we're safe.
Exactly. It feels that way. The other thing was there was the dose makes the poison was something that they said. And they had done some studies, and Anthony found these studies with low dose glyphosate. And they were seeing really weird stuff where the low dose was more toxic than the higher dose. And they were seeing that in those studies. So they said, well, let's just, set these aside. Let's make a rule that if the high dose, if you don't see evidence of harm at the high dose, you don't have to go any lower than that. The dose makes the poison, meaning that there's a linear relationship, which makes sense. You would think more is more toxic, but it's not true with endocrine disruptors. And now lately, all kinds of papers are coming out showing that glyphosate is an endocrine disruptor. And it has this property that it's much more toxic at low doses than it is at higher doses. And the low doses are what we're exposed to. So that's the thing you should be concerned about. But all the studies were high dose back then.
So we understand lots of pathways. The one pathway I don't understand is the cancer pathway. So, and we have to look at what we really have learned, thanks to Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and the metabolic theory of cancer, that the mitochondria is what malfunctions first before the oncogenes are turned on. And he's proven that numerous ways with rodent studies and everything else. And we know that we just had a guy, he was given 6 months to live back in 2014. It was just on my show, Pablo Isaiah Kelly. He was on my show in 2016 and again, and he's now over 7 years with a cancer that they sent him home to die with. And all he did was go on the ketogenic diet. That's all he's done.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So we know that the mitochondria plays a large role in the onset of cancer. What does glyphosate do to the mitochondria?
It's very, very clear that it damages. Many, many studies have shown that it causes oxidative stress. Part of it is involved with these enzymes that glyphosate is messing up due to glycine substitution. And I write about that in my book. The mitochondria get hit really hard by glyphosate. And the reason is because many of the enzymes that are involved with the metabolism of that citric acid cycle, many enzymes involved with that are disrupted by glyphosate, particularly one called succinate dehydrogenase, which is absolutely central to the citric acid cycle. Multiple studies have shown that glyphosate suppresses succinate dehydrogenase. And also studies have shown that glyphosate causes oxidative stress, meaning that these reactive oxygen species that damage, and then you get mitochondrial DNA damage, you get mutations, and that's a pathway towards cancer. So it's clear that, and you're absolutely right, I believe that the mitochondria are central to the beginnings of cancer, and I buy into that metabolic source of cancer.
So this is a question that I've been thinking of the whole time we've been talking. And is it possible to get glyphosate out of your body? If you stop, obviously you have to stop intaking new glyphosate, but can you get glyphosate out?
Yeah, well, those trees had it for 12 years and it was still there. So it's very, very difficult, I think, to get it out once it's embedded in proteins, particularly if those proteins are hard to break down, which happens because of the glyphosate being there. The critical thing, I think, is to strengthen your sulfate system. And I talk a lot about sulfate in my book. And sulfate is absolutely essential. It's in the form of heparin sulfate. It plays a critical role in the lysosomes, breaking down cellular debris. So you end up with broken proteins, misfolded, accumulating like in Alzheimer's. And they're accumulating because the system that breaks them down is broken. They can't be cleared. And part of that's because they have glyphosate in them, makes it difficult to break them down. But also because glyphosate disrupts the lysosomes because of its disruption of the supply of sulfate to heparin sulfate. And I talk a lot about heparin sulfate in my book. It's so crucial for your circulation. Your blood totally depends upon heparin sulfate. lining the blood vessels to keep the blood circulation happy, and also to keep the blood barrier healthy. And so, but then, of course, the heparan sulfate is actually chipped off and brought into the lysosomes, and the sulfate is used to create the acidic environment that allows the lysosomes to break down cellular debris, including misfolded proteins that are misfolded because of glyphosate contamination. So you get into a really bad situation where glyphosate is messing up your proteins, and it's messing up your body's ability to clear those messed up proteins. So that's a real vicious negative cycle. I believe in eating a lot of sulfur-containing foods. Epsom salt baths is one of the very few things that I do, in terms of supplement type of thing. I do very frequent Epsom salt baths in hot water, very hot water Epsom salts, and sunlight exposure. Sunlight exposure is really critical, in my view, for synthesizing cholesterol sulfate in the skin, which is very important for the heart as well, for healthy heart, and for producing heparan sulfate. So I talk about all this in my book. It's quite interesting, really, and I believe, I have, of course, organic diet, is absolutely essential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Switch to certified organic, and over time you will be able to get rid of the glyphosate, but it's going to be very slow to get rid of the glyphosate that's already in your tissues.
Well, I'm worried there's a glyphosate in animal tissue that I'm eating. Let's face it, it's incorporated into animals' tissue as well. Let me put the book up again now that you just said that about the book. So if you go to, let me get this down first. I'm sorry. Toxic Legacy, How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment by Dr. Stephanie Seneff. If you go to shrnetwork.biz/toxic, TOXIC, you can get the book and learn for yourself what to do to protect your own health. Then obviously this question is an appropriate next question from Elisa. What do you do to stay away from glyphosate in foods and in the environment, etc.? Now, obviously organic, but there seems to be some overspray on organic from time to time.
Yeah, organic doesn't always test negative. It's usually much less glyphosate in organic food than in non-organic food. And of course, they aren't allowed to use it, but they can't avoid it because it's actually in the rain. I think a study on the rain found something like 80% of the samples of rain had glyphosate in them.
So it's getting up into the atmosphere and then coming back down on us.
Yes, in the rain. And in fact, a study in Brazil just found glyphosate in the nanoparticles in the air. This one is very disturbing to me because I have been predicting that would be the case. And Anthony's talked about this too, Anthony Samsel. He and I both believe that glyphosate is a contaminant in biofuels. And this is because biofuels are derived from crops that are sprayed with glyphosate. So for example, they spray the wheat crop with glyphosate. They harvest the wheat. Of course, there's lots of glyphosate in the harvest. Then they take the stubble and they throw it on a barge and take it down to a big city and run it through a plant that's going to convert that biomass into fuel. And they can produce biogas, bioethanol, biodiesel, all these different biofuels, even bioheating oil and aviation biofuel. All of these biofuels are coming out of crops that are sprayed with glyphosate. So I think the biofuels are ending up with glyphosate in them. And then during combustion, if you combust the glyphosate, it'll break down. But if it doesn't reach combustion, it can escape into the atmosphere before or prior to combustion and accumulate in the nanoparticles in the air. And a study in Brazil found glyphosate contamination in nanoparticles in the air. And the disturbing thing was they found more in the city than they did in the areas where the glyphosate was being sprayed on the crops. And that might be because Brazil has a very heavy biofuel platform. They produce lots and lots of bioethanol from sugarcane that's sprayed with glyphosate right before harvest.
So there was an article I read about someplace in South America where they grow sugarcane. And so customarily, they burn the crop first to get rid of the broad leaves so that they can go in with the machetes and just hack the stalks. But then they discovered what the wheat farmers discovered, that if you spray the crop with glyphosate first, it's synchronized. So people are like, what does this mean? Okay, so the average wheat crop per acre may only be 85% ready to be harvested at harvest time. And the goal is to make it all ready to be harvested, matured. Well, when you try to kill a plant, it matures faster because it thinks if it doesn't pass on its genetics, it's gone, and that's it. It's a survival mechanism, continuation of the species. In fact, people who grow marijuana learned that moderate stress made the marijuana plant make more THC. So they bend the plants and tie them to the base of the one in front of it, and that stress, blah, blah, blah. So what they discovered was if you sprayed a wheat crop with glyphosate, it would be 100% ready for harvest because the dying crop would hurry up and mature. Well, they found out the same thing was true with sugarcane. So they started spraying the sugarcane fields with glyphosate 2 or 3 days before they harvested. Then they would set it on fire, and then they would harvest it. Well, all of a sudden, there was an outbreak of monocryptichism, testicles in young baby boys that were not dropping into the scrotum.
Wow.
And then there was micro, I forget what happened was all the boys born in this town,
wow,
their genitalia wasn't forming. And what they discovered was that when you burn glyphosate, the metabolite is a DHT blocker. And DHT, dihydrotestosterone, is what causes the differentiation of male and female genitalia. So all these poor people, not to mention a lot of the guys working were losing their kidneys because of the toxicity of the burned glyphosate. And Monsanto's reply was, we never said it was safe to burn it.
That's really something. I had not heard about that story about the boys and the testicles. That's quite shocking. I actually wrote more than one paper, I think 3 papers altogether, on the kidney problem, because that's very clear in Sri Lanka and in Central America. These agricultural workers who work especially in the sugarcane fields are dying in record numbers in their 40s from kidney failure. And that's a very interesting condition that I think is very clearly connected to glyphosate. There's other chemicals they're exposed to as well, and everything is synergistic. But I think glyphosate's a major player in the kidney failure that these agricultural workers are suffering from.
So other than buying strictly organic, is there anything else that you do that you know to stay away from or do differently to avoid glyphosate exposure?
Well, I worry now about glyphosate in the air. So I don't like to be in the big city. I don't like to drive. I love to drive a convertible with the top down, because I love sunlight. But I worry about it if I'm on the highway. In the convertible, I'm probably losing all the benefits of sunlight because of the air that I'm breathing. So I try to stay away from the cities. Right now I live in a very almost rural area. I mean, it's residential, but it's a very low population island in Hawaii. Actually, I'm in Kauai. I thought
Hawaii banned glyphosate.
Yeah, I wish. They did recently ban glyphosate usage on schoolyards, which you would think would be a no-brainer, but they did do that, which was really awesome. I was really glad to see that. There's been big battles here in Hawaii. It's actually quite interesting because there are very strong anti-chemical, movement here. Many activists who have been fighting, but there's also Hawaii turns out to be a very good place to develop new crops that are resistant to glyphosate, because we have a year-round. We can grow three cycles of crops. They're looking to rapidly evolve these plants by exposing them to glyphosate and seeing, catching the ones that survive and growing another round to get this perfection of a GMO resistant crop. So the industry actually is heavily invested in Hawaii, which really is frustrating. On this island where I am, Kauai, the North Shore is a bunch of organic farmers, and they've been active against GMOs from the beginning. The West Side has a whole bunch of land that's being used to develop new GMOs. So it's quite schizophrenic here. And there have been big battles, and they've won. Despite the huge amounts of money, they have bills that have been passed on multiple islands of Hawaii. At the county level, they've been passing bills to restrict the use of chemicals. Despite huge amounts of money being spent in the opposition, the bill still passes. So it's very powerful anti-GMO movement here in Hawaii, along with nasty things happening. So it's been very frustrating. It's a big battle.
We're going to take our last commercial break. We'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use code SHR20 to save 20% off your entire first order. Every day, there's a new wellness trend. Eat that. Do this. Avoid those. How do you know where to start or who to trust? Inside Tracker helps you cut through the noise by analyzing your blood, your DNA, your lifestyle, and your fitness tracker to provide you with a science-backed, trackable action plan on how to live, age, and perform better. Personalized, one-size-fits-one recommendations to help you optimize you. For a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering Superhuman Radio listeners 25% off the entire store. Go to shrnetwork.biz/inside tracker, INSIDETRACKER, to save 25% off. Change begins on the inside. Attention meat lovers. I've discovered a snack with just 2 ingredients, meat and salt. That is so tender and delicious, you almost can't believe it. That's right. No soy, sugar, or other crap. Our partner, Carnivore Snacks, nailed it with these mouth-watering snacks. They have a variety too. Ribeye, pork loin, leg of lamb, and more, all sourced here in the USA from regenerative farms. Claim your superhuman offer from Carnivore Snacks today at shrnetwork.biz/snacks. That's SNAX. Use the code superhuman for 15% off your first order plus a free 2-ounce pork loin. I keep saying the number one killer is insulin resistance. Managing blood sugar is the key to living long and aging well. But we all like to eat starchy carbohydrates and sugars from time to time. How do I manage this? I use a product called Blood Sugar Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. This easy-to-take supplement is the result of numerous tests to find the absolute best formula for maintaining healthy blood sugar. Blood Sugar Breakthrough works to safely lower blood sugar after meals so that you can maintain a healthy weight and redirect carbohydrates to your muscles where they can be burned as energy. This means you'll avoid the worst effects of high blood sugar, like weight gain and advanced aging, while enjoying more stable energy, mental clarity, and fewer cravings. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blood sugar and save 10% with code SHR10 today. Glyphosate. If you spend any amount of time sitting while at work like I do, I have the chair for you. The Backstrong chair from All 33 is the most comfortable office chair I've ever sat in. That's the truth. Their patented technology allows your body to move the way it's supposed to move while you sit. Designed by a chiropractor to position your pelvis in a way that stacks all 33 of your vertebrae into perfect alignment. The benefits of this ideal posture include relief of back pain, deeper breathing, better digestion, improved circulation, greater focus, sharper memory, and more productivity. Start experiencing these benefits today. Go to shrnetwork.biz/move and use the code SHR100 for a $100 discount on your Backstrong chair.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at Synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
Having an allergy attack today. Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Stephanie Seneff about her new book, Toxic Legacy. You can get it at shrnetwork.biz/toxic. So Natalie, who has helped produce my show, said she loves the sound of the rooster in the background.
That's true.
That means you have fresh fertilized eggs.
Yeah, I know.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's beautiful here. There's so much life. We really feel like it's back in the old days. When I was a child, we had so many, insects, and I enjoyed being outdoors and discovering the grasshoppers and the, praying mantises and all the fun things. And I don't see any of them anymore in a residential area. They're gone.
So, where's my questions? I supplement with glycine.
Yes, that's probably a good idea, actually.
Oh, wait, maybe it's not. So
organic. Make sure it's organic.
Is there a glyphosate test kit where I can take my glycine and test to see if there's any glyphosate in it.
I know. I mean, that would be a really good thing to do. And in fact, Anthony Samsel is the one who's doing this with all kinds of interesting things. He's finding it in human tissues. He's finding it in fingernails, in hair, in teeth. He's even gotten breast tissue. He's found glyphosate in all of these things, and in bile acids. He's doing really interesting. In horse's hoof, he's been testing glyphosate in all kinds of interesting places and finding it. And also, he did like organic, not organic. CAFO cows, the bones from CAFO cows, found the glyphosate in the bone, found it in collagen, found it in gelatin, because collagen has tons and tons of glycine. And I think that's why people are suffering so much from joint problems. We're getting hip replacement surgery and knee surgery and back problems and all these issues with our joints. It's because collagen, which is the most common protein in the body, 25% of the body is collagen, and it has tons and tons of glycine in it. So collagen is a good source of glycine, but you've got to buy it organic. Collagen, gelatin, and glycine itself are all going to be good sources of glycine. I like beef broth. Do the bone broth. From organic, but make sure what you buy is really high quality bones.
So, supplementing with glycine, assuming that it's not contaminated with glyphosate, would be a good strategy, because if there's an abundance of good glycine, it would be more likely incorporated into tissue than the glyphosate.
Exactly. If there's lots of glycine around, the glyphosate's less likely to get into the protein by competition. Right? Exactly right. Make sure you have lots of glycine.
So tell me more about sulfur. You said not vasopressin. You said what kind of sulfur is it? Heparin sulfate.
Heparin sulfate, yes. Well, you can take chondroitin sulfate, glucosamine sulfate, and methylsulfonylmethane. There's a product that has all three of those in it. And that seems to me like a really good source of sulfur, which is I would recommend. And then there's, of course, garlic is what I love. We eat tons of garlic in my family. We eat a lot of spices. Herbs and spices are really good to add to your food. They're very, very healthy. And garlic in particular, because it's loaded with a really healthy form of sulfur that your body can turn into sulfate.
So I have MSM. I guess I should start taking MSM and then I have glutathione sulfate at home.
Glutathione is also really, really important, and you can take N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. Glutathione is a little bit hard to get past the digestive system. You can't. It has to be like liposomal or something like that.
Yeah.
So So glutathione and its precursors, N-acetylcysteine, would be good because glutathione is actually one of the things that gets really messed up badly by glyphosate, and we talk about it. I talk about it in the book.
One more time, I'm going to put the book up because I think everybody needs to buy this book. It's called Toxic Legacy, and the best place to get it is at shrnetwork.biz/toxic, because also, not only does it detail the trouble that we're facing because of this horrible company, Monsanto, but things that you can do to protect yourself and your family. Dr. Seneff, I want to thank you so much for always being available to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. My pleasure.
And we'll talk to you again soon. I'm going to reach out to Dr. Samsel, too. I got to get him back on the show.
That would be great.
To follow up this interview with Dr. Anthony Samsel. Okay, you take care. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
And that's it for this week. We have some really good shows here, especially the one with Pablo Isaiah Kelly and this one today. These are all shows that can help save lives. And so I ask you to share them. Share them with people who you don't think need them, because this one here is big. Glyphosate is a problem. It's destroying our planet. And we have all these people out there worried about global warming / climate change, when we have more pressing problems in front of us that are threatening our population, that deserve attention, but they don't get the attention because why? Greed, baby. It's the human motivator, greed. All right, have a great weekend. We'll see everybody Monday with more Superhuman Radio. Thank you for being here today.